For nearly 2 years, Gaza has lived beneath the shadow of smoke. Airstrikes, displacement, hunger. Words that have come to define an entire generation. And yet, once again, the world finds itself holding its breath, because for the first time in months, there's a promise of something different. A pause, a chance, a deal. Donald Trump, the most polarizing political figure of our era, now stands at the center of what could become the biggest diplomatic gamble and perhaps his greatest achievement. On paper, it's a ceasefire deal, but in truth, it's something far more complex, a fragile negotiation balanced between the hopes of millions and the ambitions of a few. The war has already claimed nearly 68,000 lives, most of them civilians, families shattered, schools flattened, hospitals turned into shelters. Since March, the conflict spiraled once again after a failed truce, and since then, Gaza has been trapped in a rhythm of destruction and despair. But now, as the world watches, both Israel and Hamas have agreed in principle to a plan that, if it holds, could be the first real step toward peace in years. Trump called it the first steps toward a strong, durable, and everlasting peace. It sounds simple, but in Gaza, nothing ever is. The ceasefire's first phase is deceptively straightforward: the return of hostages held by Hamas in exchange for a limited Israeli military withdrawal. But behind every line of that agreement lie decades of mistrust, revenge, and politics. Finding all the hostages, ensuring Israel's withdrawal, verifying compliance. Every piece is a puzzle, with consequences that could reignite the war. And yet there's momentum, perhaps the strongest since the collapse of the March truce. For the first time in months, even the word peace is being spoken aloud again. But as diplomats celebrate and journalists fill headlines with cautious optimism, the real story is much darker, because in this fragile peace, the devil is in the detail.
To understand the weight of this moment, we must first understand the deal itself, the so-called Trump peace plan for Gaza. Announced through a hastily typed post on Truth Social, Trump's message carried his signature bravado. All of the hostages will be released very soon, and Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed-upon line as the first steps toward a strong, durable, and everlasting peace. All parties will be treated fairly. The words sound decisive, even presidential. But beneath the exclamation marks, diplomats know how fragile those promises truly are. According to insiders, the ceasefire agreement comes in 20 points, a framework attempting to thread the needle between an immediate truce and a long-term political resolution. The first phase: hostage exchanges, partial Israeli withdrawal, humanitarian corridors open for aid and reconstruction. The second phase, still undefined, would address the future governance of Gaza, disarmament of Hamas, and broader recognition of Palestinian autonomy. But that's where the plan falters, because even on day one, nothing is clear. Who verifies disarmament? Who guarantees withdrawal? Who defines autonomy? Each unanswered question holds the power to unravel the deal before it even begins. Even Trump's own advisors reportedly admit the sequencing is murky. One misstep, one misunderstanding, could send both sides spiraling back into bloodshed. And then there's the politics. For Trump, the timing couldn't be more opportune. After months of domestic chaos, courtrooms, and protests, this is the moment he's been waiting for. A headline that reads, "Trump brings peace to the Middle East." Behind the scenes, his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, reportedly slipped him a handwritten note during a public event. "Very close. We need you to approve a Truth Social post soon so you can announce deal first." Trump smiled, nodded slightly, and within hours, the world was watching his announcement. It was bold, impulsive, and entirely on brand. But the truth is, this is not Oslo. There are no long, drawn-out accords or photo ops on the White House lawn. This is a deal born not of diplomacy, but of dominance. A ceasefire crafted through leverage and threats, where one phone call from Washington can change the fate of an entire nation. Trump's own words to Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reveal as much. When Netanyahu expressed hesitation, reports say Trump snapped, "I don't know why you're always so fucking negative. This is a win. Take it." It's a line that defines the approach, force over finesse. And yet, against all odds, it seems to have worked, at least for now. Both Hamas and Israel have, in principle, agreed. Arab nations, including Egypt, Qatar, and the UAE, have pledged to facilitate. Even European powers, wearied from endless condemnations, are cautiously supportive. Still, beneath the applause, one question lingers. Can a deal built on pressure ever deliver peace? Because while Washington celebrates, Gaza still bleeds. The health ministry reports dozens killed even in the 24 hours leading up to the announcement. Final strikes, as Israel calls them, to secure the perimeter before withdrawal. It's a haunting paradox, a peace deal announced in the midst of war. And though Trump may frame it as a historic triumph, the people of Gaza know the truth. A ceasefire without justice is only silence before the next explosion.
When the ceasefire announcement broke, the reactions were instant and deeply divided. In Washington, Trump's allies hailed it as a historic victory. The president, beaming before cameras, called it a moment of divine diplomacy. Conservative networks echoed his words, praising his unpredictability, his deal-making genius. For Trump, it wasn't just a policy milestone, it was personal. The Nobel Peace Prize Committee had reportedly placed his name back on the shortlist. And this, perhaps, was his chance to cement his legacy as a peacemaker. But in Gaza, celebration looked very different. In the displacement camps west of Khan Yunis, a man named Mohammed Hidaida described the moment he heard the news. "When I heard the news last night, I asked people to confirm. They said it's true. An agreement has been reached. All I thought about was going home, even if my home isn't there anymore." For families like his, the ceasefire isn't about politics. It's about survival. The chance to search for loved ones, to collect what remains of their belongings, to breathe without fear. We've had enough of the killings. We lost everyone, everything. We just want to live. Even in ruins, we want to live. Elsewhere, on the streets of Tel Aviv, emotions were no less raw. Families of hostages gathered, holding pictures of their loved ones, praying this deal will finally bring them home. In one scene broadcast live on Israeli television, a mother clutched a photo of her son, kidnapped 14 months earlier, whispering, "Please, God, let this be real this time." But in the corridors of power, skepticism ran deep. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, standing before the Knesset, announced he would convene his government to approve the deal. But his words carried tension. "We will bring our dear hostages home, yet we will not abandon our national security. Israel reserves its right to defend itself." Inside his coalition, cracks began to show. The far-right ministers Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir threatened to walk out, calling the ceasefire a capitulation to terror. Behind closed doors, Netanyahu's allies warned him that agreeing could cost him his government. And across the sea in Gaza City, Hamas released its own statement, cautious, defiant, and deliberate. "We will never abandon our people's rights until freedom, independence, and self-determination are achieved." It was both acceptance and warning, a reminder that beneath the handshake lies unresolved history. Internationally, reactions rippled across capitals. From Cairo to Doha, diplomats hailed the agreement as a long overdue breakthrough. From Tehran, silence, but a silence that spoke volumes. And in Brussels, European leaders issued a cautious statement. We welcome all efforts to end the suffering of civilians and urge both sides to implement the terms in full. Meanwhile, the Palestinian BDS National Committee released a powerful statement celebrating the truce, yet warning against complacency. A ceasefire is only the first step. Without justice, without an end to occupation and apartheid, it will only mask a quieter form of violence, the violence of starvation, displacement, and denial of rights. On social media, opinions split down familiar lines. Some hailed Trump as the unexpected peacemaker. Others accused him of cynically exploiting a humanitarian crisis for personal gain. Critics pointed out that Trump's own words, "all hell will break loose in Gaza if peace isn't achieved," revealed more coercion than compassion. Still, for the first time in years, both Israelis and Palestinians were celebrating the same word: ceasefire. Not peace, not yet, but the fragile stillness that comes after unending violence. For a fleeting moment, hope flickered across the region. But as every observer knows, in the Middle East, hope without structure can be more dangerous than despair. Because the details, the timelines, the definitions, the guarantees remain undefined. And as diplomats toast historic progress, those very details are what will determine whether this deal becomes a foundation for peace or another footnote in the region's endless cycle of war.
Every ceasefire is built on a fragile promise. But in Gaza, promises are buried beneath layers of history, ideology, and politics, and this one is no different. Trump's ceasefire plan, though hailed as bold, faces a labyrinth of contradictions. It claims to create conditions for peace, yet it leaves the hardest questions untouched. Will Hamas disarm? What will become of Gaza's governance? Will Israel finally lift its siege? These aren't afterthoughts. They are the very foundations of any sustainable peace. And yet, in the pages of Trump's 20-point plan, they are deferred, postponed, or simply left blank. Diplomats call it sequencing. Realists call it avoidance. Because when neither side trusts the other, the timeline itself becomes the battlefield. In past deals, Oslo, Cairo, even the short-lived January truce, breakdowns always began with sequencing. Who moves first? Who verifies? Who guarantees compliance? This time, Trump's strategy is simpler: brute political force. He's reportedly told aides that fear is faster than diplomacy. And so, he wields leverage instead of persuasion, threatening to cut U.S. aid, freeze defense cooperation, even sanction Israeli hardliners if the deal collapses. For Israel's leadership, that's an impossible position. Prime Minister Netanyahu finds himself trapped between Washington's demands and his own far-right coalition. Figures like Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, whose political survival depends on unyielding aggression, have already declared the deal a betrayal. They warn that any withdrawal is surrender. And in Israel's polarized parliament,
Even a single defection could topple the government. Meanwhile, within Hamas, internal fractures are also widening. Its leadership in Doha and Beirut may accept the ceasefire as a necessary reprieve, but field commanders inside Gaza, who have endured years of bombardment, see withdrawal without victory as humiliation. They fear losing legitimacy among Palestinians who have sacrificed everything. Beyond both camps lies an even deeper challenge: trust in the United States itself. For decades, Washington has been seen not as a neutral broker, but as an enabler of Israel's occupation. Now, with Trump at the helm, many Palestinians view this peace as nothing more than a power play, an effort to secure his own legacy and a Nobel Prize. Yet, paradoxically, Trump's unpredictability, the same trait that terrifies his critics, may be what forced both sides to the table. As one Middle East analyst observed, he doesn't follow protocol. He threatens, insults, improvises, and sometimes that breaks deadlock, but it also risks breaking everything else. The world has seen this before. Grand peace announcements, handshakes, headlines. Then, within weeks, renewed bombardment, dead children, and smoldering ruins. Gaza's residents know this rhythm too well. They have seen ceasefires collapse overnight. Every pause in the fighting is haunted by the memory of the next explosion. Political activist Mohammed Shahada put it bluntly in an interview: as soon as a ceasefire is signed, Gaza disappears. Then it's back to the invisible violence, starvation, siege, and life as non-life. His words capture the truth that no political deal can mask, that the crisis is not just about bombs and ceasefires, but about existence itself. And so, the devil in the detail is not merely procedural, it's moral. It's about whether peace can exist without accountability, whether normalization can replace justice. The BDS National Committee voiced it sharply. A ceasefire is only the first step. Without ending occupation, apartheid, and denial of refugee rights, this is not peace. It's a pause in genocide. Those are heavy words, but they resonate far beyond Gaza. From Spain to Malaysia, from Turkey to Colombia, governments have begun imposing sanctions, freezing arms deals, and reevaluating their ties with Israel. Global sentiment is shifting, and perhaps that is why Israel, under pressure, accepted a deal it might once have rejected. But as one analyst warned, the question isn't whether Trump can make them sign. It's whether anyone can make them stay. Because in the end, the true test of this agreement won't come from signatures or ceremonies. It will come from the silence that follows, whether it lasts for a week, a month, or a generation.
While diplomats trade words in conference halls, Gaza's reality remains painfully unchanged. In the Zaytun neighborhood, a boy walks through the remains of his school, the Al-Falah school, once filled with laughter and lessons, now nothing but crumbled concrete. Its classrooms and shelters, which once housed displaced families, are blackened by airstrikes. This is what peace looks like on the ground, the silence of loss, not the song of freedom. The health ministry's figures tell their own story. Tens of thousands dead, the majority civilians. Hospitals barely functioning, clean water nearly gone, entire neighborhoods turned into ash. Yet amid the devastation, people still cling to hope.
not because they believe in politics, but because they must. In a small camp west of Khan Yunis, women gather around a fire, boiling tea in dented pots. They whisper about returning home, about rebuilding, about burying the dead properly. Their faces are lined with dust, but their eyes still burn with something unbreakable: resilience. One woman says, "We want to go back. Even if there's nothing there, even if we rebuild with our hands, we will go back." For them, the ceasefire isn't a triumph of diplomacy. It's a brief chance to breathe, to rest, to remember the lives lost. But even as the ceasefire takes effect, reports emerge of gunfire at the borders. Israel claims security enforcement. Hamas accuses violations of the truce. The tension feels like a ticking clock. Every moment without violence feels borrowed. Across Gaza's hospitals, doctors dare to hope that supplies will soon arrive. Trucks from Egypt, Qatar, and the UN wait at checkpoints, filled with medicine and food. But bureaucracy slows everything. Signatures, inspections, delays, and the people continue to wait. In this uneasy calm, something else is happening, a quiet reflection. People begin to question not just the war, but the world watching it. Why did it take so long? Why must peace always arrive too late, after the graves are full? The answer, as always, lies not in one man or one deal, but in the imbalance of power that defines Gaza's story. A territory sealed by blockade, governed by desperation, and remembered by the world only when it burns. Political analyst Moeen Rabbani summed it up on air: "This deal may stop the bombs, but it will not stop the conditions that created them. The genocide may pause, but unless the world changes course, Gaza will remain in a permanent state of non-life." And yet, in the ruins, there are signs of renewal. Children play amid the rubble, drawing hearts in the dust. A man plants olive saplings near the debris of his home. Life, stubborn and sacred, refuses to die. For the people of Gaza, peace has never been given. It is something they remake every day, even when the world forgets them. And in this fragile moment of ceasefire, they are once again rebuilding, not just homes, but hope itself. As the cameras flash and statements circulate, the world's attention shifts once more. In Washington, President Trump calls the Gaza ceasefire a monumental step toward peace. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu speaks cautiously about security and redemption. And in Gaza, people dig through the rubble, searching for bodies, for belongings, for memories. 3 cities, 3 narratives, and none of them the same. For Trump, this moment is history in motion, an opportunity to recast himself not as a disruptor, but as a deliverer. In his mind, this deal stands as proof that brute strength can yield diplomacy, that pressure can create peace. But diplomacy is not a contest of willpower, it is a mirror of truth. And the truth is complicated. Behind every handshake, there are ghosts. Behind every ceasefire, there are questions unanswered. What happens when the hostages are freed? When the cameras leave? When the next provocation comes? Veteran negotiators warn that the deal's success will not be measured by Trump's announcement or Netanyahu's approval. It will be measured by whether a single Palestinian child can grow up without fear, by whether a family can rebuild without being bombed again, by whether Gaza for once is allowed to live rather than merely survive. And yet, the cycle continues. Already, reports emerge of political jockeying, Israeli ministers calling for military review, Hamas commanders questioning the terms, U.S. officials planning Trump's triumphant visit to the region. It is a moment poised delicately between hope and hubris. For some, it is a flicker of light. For others, just another mirage on the endless horizon of Middle Eastern politics. In truth, this deal reveals less about peace and more about power, how it's wielded, traded,
and dressed up as mercy. Trump's team calls it a victory for diplomacy. But real diplomacy is not about forcing silence, it's about building understanding. And in Gaza, silence is never peace. It is the echo of unfinished suffering. Still, hope lingers. Not in the speeches or the treaties, but in the people themselves. In the teacher sweeping glass from a classroom floor. In the child drawing a flag on a cracked wall. In the mother whispering prayers over her lost son. These are the architects of peace. Not presidents, not ministers, not generals, but ordinary souls who choose to hope even when there is no reason to. Because someday, if peace does come to Gaza, it will not arrive with applause or politics. It will arrive quietly, in the form of safety, dignity, and freedom. And until that day, every ceasefire, no matter how fragile, will be a small act of defiance, a refusal to let humanity disappear. So, as the world applauds and analysts debate Trump's triumph, one truth remains unshaken. A deal may end a war, but only justice can end the reasons for war. In Gaza, peace is not signed, it is survived.